Hi, I'm Dr. Christina Blatchford, and on today's webinar, I'm excited to share what we call the ultimate insurance question. Do you want less insurance-driven patients and more fee-for-service patients who truly value your dentistry? If your answer is yes, or even maybe, you're going to love this webinar. If you're tired of being controlled by insurance companies that are essentially devaluing your dentistry by placing restrictions on the treatment for your patients, we share our systematic approach for becoming what we call an unrestricted provider. It's a big shift, and when it's done right, it means less stress and significantly more profits. It's a proven system that puts you back in control and allows you to attract more patients who trust and value their relationship with you and your team. You'll hear how this powerful system allows you to provide ideal treatment by involving your patients in their dental decisions without them always asking, what will my insurance cover? And if you watch the entire webinar, I'll reward you at the end with the opportunity to hear step by step how this can work in your practice. Trust me, this system is a game changer for dentists who are sick and tired of seeing more and more patients just to make the same amount of money and have the same amount of stress year after year. There's a better way to practice, and the dentists who have made this shift all wish they'd done it years ago. So listen up, take notes, and enjoy. Hi, I'm Dr. Christina Blatchford, and welcome to Conversations with Blatchford. Today, I am joined by Dr. Brad Brayman. He is one of our great coaches, and I'm also joined by my dad, Dr. Bill Blatchford. And today, our Conversations with Blatchford are going to be focusing on PPO versus fee-for-service. And this is something that we all three feel very passionately about. We've helped so many of our doctors go from being PPO heavy in their practice to being fee-for-service or almost fee-for-service. And we'd love to share our thoughts on that during our Conversations with Blatchford. Dad, why don't you talk about a little bit about the history?
They would look at me being the oldest one here to talk about the history.
Well, I mean, it seems appropriate.
Seems appropriate. All right. So, well, when I started practicing, there was virtually no insurance. And as insurance came along, to entice us to become providers for the insurance companies, actually the fees they were offering us were higher than our usual and customary.
Well, that sounds pretty good.
Well, it was very nice. And the other thing about that is that the maximum per year, I remember this was back in the 70s, was $1,000 per year.
Okay.
And that hasn't changed much, but fees have continued to not keep up with inflation. And the interesting thing is, when I started practicing also, you want to remember, Christina and Brad, that the average overhead for a general dental practice was 45%.
Oh.
Which means the doctor takes home 55 cents on the dollar. So that was one thing. And as insurance came along, and within just recently, as we all are aware, the average overhead has gone to 75%, which means the doctor takes home 25 cents on the dollar, which is half what it was, which means we've had to double the volume of patients in a given day to net the same amount of money. And that's one model to follow, is to increase the volume, see more patients, run them through at a lower fee. And of course, fees continue to get lower every year.
Well, I mean, I think that that's one choice, but I'm sure Brad can attest to this. What do you think goes down when you see like increased volume, customer service?
Customer service, hopefully quality doesn't, but I think we probably all know that that's going to be sacrificed at some point. And I just want to clarify something. So what you're saying is, because insurance companies have ratcheted their fees down, dentists have taken a 50% pay cut.
That is absolutely correct. A 50% pay cut for each item, each service that they provide. That's correct. Absolutely. So when I did a root canal in the mid 70s, and let's say the fee was $200, I took home $100 of that. So nice. We just stay with inflation, and everything else went up in cost, but the portion left for the doctor was cut in half.
Ouch.
Ouch.
So this, I think a really, maybe we should address our audience now. And I'm going to look right at the camera and say, if being controlled by, if working for insurance companies is working for you and you're finding that it's satisfying, you're able to take the time off you want, you're able to earn the income you want, and you have a happy team and life is good, then the next little bit of this recording is probably not worth your time.
Well, I would also add to that, Brad, are they able to do the kinds of treatment they want to do?
That's a big one.
I mean,
the satisfaction of doing your job is huge.
The income is one, and the time off is one, the happy team is one. But can you do the type of treatment that you, as the dentist, would prescribe for the patient in this situation?
And hence what the patient wants.
And that's a big problem.
Are you allowing, you as the dentist, allowing the insurance company to dictate what the patient's after, or what the options the patient has available to them?
And because the patients have grown to the idea that the insurance company is the final authority on whether the treatment is necessary, desired, or whatever.
Right.
And even though they may not be paying for a particular item, they deny payment on that item. And therefore the patient gets a message from a third party, theoretically an expert, that this is not desirable treatment. So it really kind of affects ideal treatment plans.
Absolutely. When I purchased my practice right out of school in 2009, it was one of two practices for sale in the Portland area. The other one was a 3-doctor practice, and being only one doctor. And I knew I did not want to go into corporate dentistry. So this was my choice. The practice accepted, or was a network with 16 different PPOs. And I used to joke that, and it was a sad joke, but joke that we even would accept a note from your mom saying, you deserve some type of discount in this practice. So, and what I did was, we really had to switch our deserve level and switch our ideals about dentistry. My team at the time when I purchased this practice was really dialed into thinking that patients would only accept what their insurance would allow them to do each year. So it was very much crown of the month or crown of the year. We'd be lucky if it was crown of the month, crown of the year dentistry.
Well, and you started going to John Coyce's program and learning how to do ideal treatment and present ideal treatment to patients based on what their desires were. And all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but you could not do that one tooth at a time so easily.
No.
And that became the max from the insurance company. I think a big discussion, Brad, is the ethical dilemma of the doctor in network. And so a patient comes in network, and here's another patient comes in that's out of network. And because we have to make the whole thing work economically, we charge the out-of-network patient our usual and customary, which is generally higher than the insurance company pays. How do you justify that ethically?
Personally, I can't.
You didn't.
No, I didn't. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned that. I actually had a patient ask me that very question. He said, do you charge your insurance patients less than you're charging me? And I said, absolutely not.
And you bought a practice that was total fee-for-service.
Fortunately, there was one where I wanted to live and practice.
A fee-for-service practice where you're charging the same. And we have a client we've worked with for many years. He's one of our highest producing clients over on the Oregon coast. And he tells his patients, I charge the same to everybody. I'm just like the grocery store. Everybody pays the same here.
Well, really, that's the only ethical way you can do it.
And that's fair. I mean, that's ethical, fair, and I really like that. So I think that's a question for you doctors that are in network. How can you justify in your own mind the ethics of charging certain patients less or charging more? When we started back in the 70s, dental statutes came out that we could not charge our insurance patients more than our regular patients because, as I said, the fees were higher at that time.
Okay.
But now we're seeing companies, even post-COVID, one of the companies is offering a $20,000 cash payment if you will sign a new contract for 3 years, guaranteeing that you will charge your patients these 20% lower fees for the next 3 years.
That's like just throwing a frog in the boiling water. I mean, that's awful.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that this idea that how can we charge less? I mean, we know that's not right. I don't think anybody on the planet would argue with us that that's not okay to do. There's a book I read recently called Mistakes Were Made but not by me.
Oh.
And the author's name is Carol Tavris, and she talks about this concept of cognitive dissonance, and it's how do you make your outside world match your inside world? So how do you justify what lies do you tell to yourself to make it okay to do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. If you're in the mood for a good book, it's worth the read.
Now, we talk about this, and I think that our audience is probably feeling like, well, gosh, that sounds great and all, but, I'd like to know, how do you go, how I went from 16 different PPOs and a note from your mom to going to 2. And, that we have a very systematic approach to this to be able to really keep most of the great patients who really value the service that we're doing and value the relationship that we have. And then we also then let some of those patients who maybe value their insurance over that go and find a different provider, and that works okay too. But we have a very systematic approach that we use to make this work. So, I think that we can kind of talk about it, and it might sound a little bit flippant to our audience that we think, hey, just go ahead and get off those, but that's not the case.
We're
we
not
really
saying that.
want to make sure that
it's like the doctor in Florida I talked to yesterday afternoon who has just taken over a practice. And of course, they had Delta, and they had Cigna, and they had Aetna, and they have a few others. And so the question has been, should he sign up and be a provider? Well, the first thing Delta did was cut his fees 25% from the seller. Well, we looked at that, and what we figured out was he got very little income from Delta patients last year anyway, so we didn't do that one. Now, Aetna is doing the same thing. He called, what should I do? And I said, well, first we've got to get some data. And what I suggest is we do the 80-20 spreadsheet. And the 80-20 spreadsheet is very simple. And as I said to him, I'm sure that his office manager can set this up as a Excel spreadsheet or get it from his software. He happened to have EagleSoft. And we list every patient by name, column A, column B, how much they spent or how much you collected from that patient or their insurance in the last 12 months. And then column C, a running total. And then when you get all the data in, you arrange column B, that's the annual spending, into descending order. And what we've done this on hundreds of our clients, so we know the answer. And you get about 80% of your income from 20% of your patients.
Sure.
And then I said, study everything about those patients. Age, gender, type of treatment, how they found you, what insurance, if any, they have, every characteristic you can about them. And that's who you want more of. Mm-hmm. And this particular doctor was concerned about his hygienists are producing very little, and his practice has 3 hygienists. So that's the top 20. And then we have the next 60% of the patients produce 30% of the income. So we're up to 110%. And the bottom 20%, we lose 10%. Right. And as he started looking at that, and of course we have to know the overhead per hour, and you've worked with a lot of people on doing that. And his hygienists in this particular case are not even producing enough to cover the overhead per hour. So I'm quite sure when he does the exercise, he's going to find a lot of those, the answers whether he should go out of network in the bottom 20%.
I also like to combine that data. We really study this a lot, so we need a lot of data. And I like to combine the 80-20 spreadsheet data with the last year's gross collections, what insurance companies represented, each different one out of the total of last year's gross collections, so that we can see what these people are spending in the office. Because, it is much more important to understand the finances of it versus the volume of patients. How many patients we had on Delta, it doesn't really matter. How much of those patients spend in our office last year. And then I also like to get the all-ceramic crown fee for each of the different ones, compare it to our fee for service. And does that even make sense with our overhead per hour? In other words, if we're doing a crown for, let's say, $800, which, by the way,
we've seen as low as $6. So,
by the way, 10 years ago or 11 years ago when I was in dental school, crowns were $700 and whatever for those gold mulberries that that we cast ourselves. I'm just saying,
in dental school.
Yeah. So it's insulting to a dentist who is post dental school, taking a lot of continuing ed, working on his or her education, and then
gets to charge $600, $700, $800 for something that, really is worth so much more.
I think we need to remember here something I want to throw out to our audience is that not to judge or let your team judge these people whether they have this insurance or that insurance. Remember, most of them didn't choose that insurance. Their employer chose that insurance. So you want to make sure you look at these people all as equal people. Just because they've got a bad insurance company doesn't make them a bad person. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that.
It's easy to forget.
It's easy.
Because the patient sometimes will kind of come down on you because you're not a participating provider.
Right.
And so we kind of tend to judge them, like you said, based on their insurance because of past experiences. And I think going back up in altitude a little bit, to look at the whole picture, your mindset is really where this all begins. What is the mindset that you have around insurance? How do you feel about insurance? Part of the system that we use to define whether or not it's would be beneficial to go out of network is, are you and your team 100% convinced that staying in network is the absolute worst thing you could do and the only path forward is to be out of network? Because if you're even slightly doubtful, your patients will pick up on that and they'll call BS on you in a hurry. So you have to be 100% convinced. Your mindset has to be totally that what you do is valuable enough to charge your fees and to not let an insurance company tell you what you're worth.
Or dictate the treatment plan.
Even worse, dictate the treatment plan.
Yeah. Well, I think, you and the consultants have come up with a term for these doctors who are out of network, the unrestricted provider. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, did you go to dental school to be restricted? I mean, ostensibly, most of us went to dental school to work for ourselves because we choose to be independent. We choose to think for ourselves. And so did you put in 4 years and $500,000 worth of debt to come out and have somebody tie your hands behind your back and restrict you and what you can do and what you can offer your patients?
So when I heard the unrestricted provider from you and from the consultants, I thought, wow, what a great way to say it, because it means to the patient that I don't need to have the insurance companies tell me my treatment plans. I'm free to come up with a treatment plan based on what you and I agree on, not based on what the insurance company restricts us to.
One of the conversations or one of the topics that always comes up when I'm talking with a new potential client is, what's the big deal? Why should I join Blatchford? And there's 3 legs to the stool that I always give them the example of. And one of those legs is, we're going to take better care of our patients, not by doing better dentistry. That's up to you. But we're going to take better care of our patients by involving them in their treatment decisions.
Yes.
They are a part of this process. It's a conversation between the doctor and the patient. Insurance companies should have no bearing on that whatsoever.
What you had mentioned is that there's 2 choices. And I think about one of our clients that really was in a situation where he was at the brink of making a choice in terms of insurance. And his practice was really heavily PPO oriented when we started working with him, and he was thinking about he has 3 hygienists, now he has 2, because he's changed his relationship and become a non-restricted provider. By the way, I will just say, before people start to think that he's doing less dentistry, he started out with us collecting about $60,000, and now he is 12 months later collecting $160
a month.
Yeah.
Right.
So extra $100,000 each month. So extra 1.2 million. So anyway.
And he's in I want to say too, he's in a very competitive area where most doctors would say, everybody here is in network. There's no way to go out of network, et cetera. Well, he did.
Well, but he had to make a huge mindset shift.
Yeah.
He and his team it starts with the leader, but he had to make a huge mindset shift. And we laugh about this, that even though his parking lot was dotted with Mercedes
and up,
and his patients would talk about their recent vacation to Barbados or the like, that was pre-COVID, but they're going to go back, I'm sure. But anyway, so he felt like he needed to think about hiring even a fourth hygienist because he had so many new patients, of course, from all these different plans. But he was running around like crazy, potentially looking at hiring a fourth hygienist so he could see more and more patients. And really, he realized, my patient care it stinks, just like Brad was talking about, if we could do high volume, but you don't get to make those personal relationships. You don't have that quality in the dentistry, and it just isn't satisfying.
I think one thing we should probably talk about with this is that to go out of network and become a non-restricted provider, you have to develop some different skills, as in communications.
Absolutely.
You now have to present the value of treatment in a way that the patients will go ahead and spend money on it without a discount. You have to learn how to ask questions, find out what the patient wants, find out why they want it, how badly they want it, all of the questions, and your whole team has to get into this. The whole team. I think of the hygienist, for example, in the recall visit or new patient visit, they can't just talk about the cracked marginal ridge or the
or the weather
or the weather. They've got to have a meaningful conversation with patients about what their long-term goals are dental wise, and then convey that to the doctor, who can come up with a treatment plan that matches those desires. And that's not something that most dentists and team are doing. They've got to get some training in that.
Well, because they have to do so much dentistry. They don't have time to do that.
They don't have time for that.
It reminds me of a saying that Brian Tracy used to talk about. I lose money on every sale, but I make it up on the volume.
Yeah.
But that's a very nice explanation of that one leg of the stool that I was talking about. We're going to help you take better care of your patients by involving them in their treatment decisions, and the conversation, the questions that you're talking about are something that we teach very nicely.
And we find when the patient does get involved, and then we start asking questions, find out what they want and why they want it, they do accept better treatment plans than what will my insurance cover.
Absolutely.
It's a much different program.
And it's a treatment plan to get them to the goal they've told us they want. This is not we don't come up with a treatment plan and tell them this is what you need.
Yeah.
Absolutely no agenda. We have no agenda.
Well, as we've said, nobody needs any of the dentistry we do. We don't even need teeth. So we can get along just so. And I'm sincere about that. Is no one needs teeth. I mean, that's I happen to like mine, but we don't. If people ask us what we need. What do I need, Doc? You don't need anything. You don't even need your teeth. And that just opens up a whole conversation with the patients, telling us why they want their teeth.
Well, I think if you talk to any cardiologist, they'll probably tell you people live longer without their teeth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I bet a lot of people who are listening to this are probably wondering, how does that work? What is the system that we want to use? And I'd like to talk about the system, but before we do, I'd like to just emphasize that it is very much a system. And we've seen doctors not use the system, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, Dad.
Well, what I would say is this is not a do-it-yourself kit. I mean, this is not a do-it-yourself project. And so many doctors that we've talked to have tried this. And Duke and I were talking about one just the other day that talking with a doctor in New York, that his staff got all excited and they decided, hey, we can do this, and they did. And when we had a conversation with the doctor, he was going to a payday service to make payroll, for borrowing money to make payroll for his staff and what to do. And we've seen more doctors that have tried the do-it-yourself route, and what happens is they drop one, they get a couple patients complaining, they go back on, and they go right back on insurance. We've seen a lot of that.
Well, something that happens, and you alluded to this earlier, when you do that, you change your relationship with the insurance company. When you come back, conveniently, the fees that you were getting are now 25% lower.
That's correct. If you do this and force yourself back on, we've seen that where they drop the fees 20-25%. So it's not a do-it-yourself project. So the system that we use, and of course all three of us are aware of it, but we do a very systematic approach. We look at the data we talked about earlier in this session about which companies to drop. We look at which patients are predominantly heavy with that insurance company. The lowest fee structures, we start with those. We work our way through it. And during that period of time, we are training the staff at Blatchford. We're training the staff how to communicate with patients. It's one thing to say, just for example, that, oh, no, we're strictly a cash practice. We don't take insurance. No, we're an unrestricted provider. It's a totally different message for the patients. But without the training, the staff and the doctor blurt things out that make it look like it's not so good for the patient. And then I think the communication, how to collect, how to have the patient say yes to an ideal treatment plan. That's one whole conversation. That's one whole training session we do. And out of our 4 days of seminar that we do, roughly 3 days of that is on how to talk to patients about treatment, how to collect money. How to collect money without waiting for the insurance company to pay. There's a lot of systems that we've developed over the years to put in place to make this work.
Yeah, it's going through it in a stepwise fashion without getting the cart in front of the horse that makes it work. And we all know people that you guys have mentioned earlier, like you and Duke were talking about, that it doesn't work. And what you were able to do, go from 16 to 2, you didn't just start writing letters and firing insurance companies.
No.
You went through it in a very systematic approach. You had conversations with patients, and it worked beautifully. So if done properly, it works well. Now, something I think that doctors I've worked with, that I know all three of us have, that they find there's a reduction in patient volume.
Yes.
And they're not booked out 3 or 4 weeks anymore. They're only maybe booked out a week or maybe even a few days. And we mentioned mindset earlier. That's a big mind shift to go from the feeling comfortable about being booked out a month to, oh my gosh, I don't have anything on Wednesday.
Well, it depends what makes you comfortable.
Exactly. It's that mindset, right?
If being booked out 3 months makes you comfortable, or does ideal treatment planning and a better schedule and a better profitability make you comfortable? Whatever makes you...
That's easy for me to answer. I think
I
no for you
understand.
too.
Easy for me as well, but there are some people that really... their comfort zone, their worth in life is how far they're booked out in advance.
Which is okay.
And that's fine too.
Absolutely.
Which is why insurance will always be there.
Yes.
Because there will always be people that really value that over what we're talking about, and that's okay too. It's just fine. But we'd love to be able to help these doctors, if they're interested, to be able to really reclaim the practice that they would like to have.
Well, I would say this, first off, yes, we'd love to help them. And I will say this, is that the insurance companies need a dentist a lot more than a dentist needs an insurance company.
Right.
But we've developed a program over the years. It's an 18-month program, and helping doctors, among other things, this is just part of what we do.
One of many.
But getting out of network, becoming a non-restricted provider, which enhances the cash flow of the practice. It allows better treatment plans. It allows more time off because we're not seeing as many patients. And by the way, we include the team in that, of course, as the team also gets the time off with pay. And as a result of that, we end up with these offices that have absolutely incredible teams. They've got teams that are, TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. I get to go back to work.
Absolutely.
And they love it.
We also, another thing that you didn't mention, but I think it's worth mentioning, is that our teams have an opportunity to bonus, and based on collections, and we don't bonus until the team is at 20%. So some of our doctors who are probably listening to this are probably thinking, oh, great, you bonus, that's nice. Wait a minute, I'm not even bringing enough home for myself.
Yeah.
Not what we're interested in. We want to make sure that the doctor is well taken care of and that the team is incentivized by having a bonus plan.
Well, if you look at it, and again, going back in history, when insurance started, we had smaller staffs. And then the insurance came along and we had to hire, for example, we've seen clients that have one full-time person just dealing with insurance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes 2 or 3.
At the front, because the thing is that at the front, somebody needs to call and verify the different insurance. And when I first started at my practice, I wasn't super busy. And so I was just checking out all the different things that go on at my practice. And I noticed that there was an amazing amount of time that my office coordinator spent on the phone, on hold, with insurance. So you have to have somebody, you almost have to have an extra person dedicated just to that, which is crazy.
So the average really grew from 20% for staff overhead to the current 35%. And we have over the years been able to maintain literally hundreds of practices at 20%. And paying individuals more, we just don't have as many of them.
Right,
Yes.
and the time off that you mentioned. So those are the other two legs of the stool that I like to talk about. One is take better care of our patients. The other one is more time off with pay for you and your team, and that's accomplished by the reduction in patient volume. But you also see a commensurate increase in dollar volume flowing through your practice. And then the third leg of the stool is the opportunity for the team to earn a bonus through a very clear, simple, transparent bonus system where they don't earn a bonus until you're taking home what you want to take home as the doctor.
Exactly.
So it's those three things really are kind of from 30,000 feet what we help doctors accomplish on a routine basis.
And if you just take, Brad, from you take $1 million practice, at 30% for staff, and we get that down to 20, there's $100,000 right there. That goes home
to the doctor.
That goes home, and if
Yeah.
you then if you take a look at, we have over close to 200 doctors in our what we call our big doc club, at 1.6 on up into several million, and you take 10% of those practices, and we're talking some serious money.
Yeah.
We're talking.
And a question that we get oftentimes, I know all three of us have when we're talking with a prospective client, is that, well, so you get your team to 20%, so that just means I'm going to have to go through and fire a bunch of people, right? The answer is absolutely not. What we do is we look and see what is the most expeditious way to get you to 20%. And more often than not, it is having better conversations with patients and actually raising your revenue, which is also accomplished by becoming an unrestricted doctor. And so you raise your revenue rather than cut your expenses.
Right, and so if you're at 30% producing a certain amount, say $1 million, if you go to 1.5, that automatically puts you at 20% with the same size staff you have, the same payroll.
Exactly.
But it's now 20%, whereas I think traditionally as a doctor went from 1 million to 1.5, they would hire more people to handle the increased volume, whereas what we're doing is teaching them how to do it on a lower volume of patients so that they can put that at 20%.
And if you choose to participate with a bunch of insurance companies, whether PPOs or regular insurance, whatever, it doesn't matter, you have to hire more people to do more production. I mean, it's simply a numbers game, so you don't really have a choice.
Well, and we've seen a lot of these clients where they're over-hygiened, and yet they're when they do the 80-20 spreadsheet, what they find is some of these people that are filling their hygiene schedule are only doing what the insurance covers. That's the 2 prophies a year, and they're doing it at a fee that is break even at best.
At best.
And sometimes they're actually losing money. And when they calculate the overhead per hour, which is a number that we've made a big thing about, and as far as I know, we're the only consulting company out there that even looks at that. But it's something we came up with years ago. What is the overhead per hour? How much does it cost to see a hygiene patient? How much does it cost to do a crown? How much does it cost to do a single crown versus multiple crowns? How much does it cost for every procedure in the office? And it's a number that I don't know how a doctor can operate without knowing that number. To me,
Well, no other business can.
You can't make decisions without having some data on what things cost. And I remember when I was lecturing a lot, you get a room with several hundred people and have the office managers identify themselves and walk down the aisle with your microphone and say, what's it cost to do a crown in your office? And they would tell me the fee, what they should do. That's what you charge. What does it cost to do it? And they would tell me the lab fee. And I'd say, no, that's because there's no rent and the staff all works for nothing. Oh, yeah. And they had no clue. What's it cost to see a hygiene patient? Well, the cost per hour for the hygienist and the doctor are exactly the same when you take the lab bill out. And so everybody's amazed to see that. And I've pointed out to the doctor in Florida last night with his 3 hygienists. I said, if you have 1 cancellation in hygiene per day, hygiene runs in the red for the entire day. And most hygienists are absolutely floored by that concept that, it's not a big deal, it's just 1 patient.
Right.
but the margin there is very tight. And then if you're asked to take a reduced fee for that, and then you have a cancellation.
It's
it.
yeah, it's just tying anchors
And
to your
of course,
feet.
one of the things that we find too is that patients who don't pay anything for those hygiene visits, in other words, they're free, they're the ones that tend to miss the appointment.
Right.
Because it's free anyway, it's no big deal, I'll just reschedule it. And anyway, so.
Like a part of this discussion too is learning what it is, the 80-20 spreadsheet that you mentioned, learning what it is that the patients who value what you do, what is that they value about what you do? And then you can look for more patients, which incidentally, we also are very good at helping doctors develop a system to get more patients that they want. That's a topic for another day. But that's a big part of this in becoming unrestricted, is that if you're going to see fewer patients on whom you lose money, well, I guess if that's the case, then you're better off just not going to work.
To go from a practice where the insurance company is referring patients to you,
Right.
because you're willing to take a lower fee,
Right.
or you're having patients referring to you because you're good.
That's where I'm going.
That's where you're good. So we'd love to help you doctors convert your practice into a fee for service and much more rewarding.
Absolutely.
We help a lot of doctors that do want to stay in network with insurance companies, and that's perfectly fine. We can help you maximize that part of your practice as well. So this isn't the only path forward. This is one path that a lot of doctors choose because they simply don't feel good about the way things are going with insurance. And so we can help you either way, whatever it is that you want. We have a system to help you get there. And we pass no judgment either way. One's not better than the other. It's based solely on what it is that you want for your practice and your life. It's solely your decision.
Well, Brad, one of the things, and you're correct on that, we will work with either way. We work with lots of different models. But when I talk to doctors, and I see doctors on various forums that I'm on, insurance reimbursement rates seem to be high on the list of frustrations for doctors.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet what most do about it is complain on the internet about it, but they don't do anything.
Well, they probably are on the internet because they had one of those patients no-show, and so they have time to be on the
I
internet.
got it. Yep, that's
and
right.
They're spending part of their vacation at their desk in front of their computer,
Well, that's
which
a whole
is about the lamest vacation you can spend. Whole nother story.
That's Dan Sullivan. he takes his vacation at the resort, and these doctors take theirs at their desk on the internet between patients. So Brad, you mentioned that sometimes when doctors become non-restricted providers, they see a lower volume of new patients.
Well, just a lower volume of patients coming through your practice. In other words, maybe you have one column instead of two.
Okay.
But how do we fill that one column?
Yeah, so the way we fill that one column is with better patients. So we've got to have a system where the team really learns how to communicate with patients and communicates that value so we get patient referrals. And Stina, you've seen some clients that we're working with that are seeing as many as 80% of their patients are coming from word of mouth referrals and social media, which is patients talking about you.
Absolutely. That's how I was able to do well in my practice, by changing my relationship with 14 of the PPOs. And we still sometimes accepted a note from your mom.
Yeah.
But just kidding. But that really was, it's a big part of all of our practices is internal referrals. And it's something that is the least expensive form of marketing that we can do, but it's the most effective.
Yes.
And so we have a great segment from Dr. Daniela Eversgerd on social media marketing you mentioned, and she actually is getting 42 new patients a month just by marketing on social media.
And we have found that internal referral that patient is worth about 2.5 times what a insurance-generated referral is worth.
Now, just to clarify, when we say what that patient is worth, we're not reflecting on them as a human being.
That's correct.
We're just simply referring to the revenue that is the money they are willing to spend.
Strictly the revenue that is spent on that first go-around, first series of appointments.
Right.
We're not talking about the lifetime value of that patient, which, again, the lifetime value of a patient which comes in as an internal referral is certainly more than a patient that came to you because you've got this special that you sent out in a mailer for a $99 new patient experience, and they will
Right.
come to you and tell they get a flyer that somebody will do it for $89 next year.
And away they go.
And away they go. So we see a huge increase in the value, short-term and
Yeah.
long-term, of that internal referral. And again, that's a system that has to be learned by the doctor and the team to make that
key,
happen.
by the team too. That's really key. All these things that we've been talking about today are kind of pointing in one direction, and that is that at some point, as we've all seen it happen in medicine, and it's coming in dentistry, we're going to see a bifurcation of how care is delivered.
Mm-hmm.
One model is going to be the PPO insurance-driven, high volume, treat them and street them, drill them, fill them and bill them, whatever that model is, which is fine. And that works great for some people. There are patients for whom that's exactly the right model, and it works great. Then you're going to see private practices, doctors who want to be unrestricted, who want to take the time and spend it with their patients to really develop a good relationship and deliver exactly what that patient expects. Both models are great. Both models are fine. I'm not passing judgment on either one. But at some point, doctors are going to have to make a decision on which way they want to go. Because as we all know, if you sit on the fence too long, it starts to get pretty painful. And
Well, while you're sitting on the fence, other people make the decision for you.
well, that's right. And they'll push you into the cow patty on the other side.
That's right. That's right.
That would be the insurance company.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all of your input, for both of you. I really appreciate all of the great input. And, if you have listened to this and are interested in having us help you create the practice of your dreams by potentially changing the relationship with your PPOs and becoming unrestricted, we are excited to work with you.
Thanks for watching. Your bonus is an opportunity to explore the possibility of becoming an unrestricted provider. You'll get to have an honest conversation with myself or one of our other mentor doctors about how our system works. Trust me, this call will be a real eye-opener about what's possible when you decide to end the insurance game. Even if you don't want to become 100% fee-for-service, this will still be a great way to clarify your vision for the future. Either way, we will show you how to maximize the value of every patient in your practice. To schedule a call, simply click on the link below. We'll ask you a few questions on a short survey, and then simply pick a time and date to schedule your call. Thanks again for watching.